Hey, family, God bless you, and welcome back to Fridays by the Fire. I am your host and your favorite, Sandy Best Life Jones, and I am delighted to be back with you once again for another segment of my second born podcast. All right, so tonight's segment is entitled How to Train Your Faith. So let me start right here. Over the past year, as you know, if you follow me on social media, I have lost over 80 pounds, dropped about 12 sizes. So I went from a 24 to a 12 in about a year and some change, and I'm really, really grateful. I feel so good. I can't even explain how good I feel. And but now I'm in a new phase of this journey that I'm on because weight loss or losing weight and building strength are two different things. And because I didn't lift weights while I was losing the weight, I did strictly cardio, meaning I was walking every day, at least a mile every day. And that's all I did. I didn't lift weights really at all. Every now and then I would, but I didn't really focus on lifting weights. And so now my goal is to build muscle mass. Now, in the midst of building this muscle mass, I will probably lose some weight, but that's not the goal. The goal is to get stronger. The goal is to tighten and to tone and really to stabilize my body so it can actually hold the progress that I've made. That's the goal with strength training. I'm going to be working with my absolute favorite trainer, Dr. Glenda Shepard, and we're going to get started at the end of this month, and it'll be twice a week of strength training and then 2 or 3 days a week of cardio. My cardio is going to cut down a little bit. It used to be about an hour every session, but now it's going to be about 20 minutes because I've added that strength training. So I don't have to do as much cardio for as long. But this is what I've learned through this process. And this is why tonight's episode is called How to Train Your Faith. Just because I'm lighter, it doesn't mean I'm stronger. It just means I've lost weight. But I haven't really built any muscle. And just because I look and I feel better, it doesn't mean that my body is anchored in a way that it can hold on to this progress that I've made so far in this last year and some change. And so I was thinking about that and I said, this is exactly how faith works. This is how faith works. A lot of us have lost weight spiritually. We have dropped habits. We have dropped people. We have survived seasons that almost took us out of here. But survival of the season does not mean that the season made you stronger. It just means you got through it, like barely. And you can believe God and still be emotionally shaky. You can quote scripture and still feel like you are unanchored. When the pressure shows up, you just feel like you're being tossed to and fro because that anchor is not there. And that's because your faith, like your muscles, has to be trained. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So part 1, untrained faith versus anchored faith. What does it look like? So most people do not have weak faith. They have untrained faith. And untrained faith reacts. It does not respond. It panics. It overexplains. It chases clarity. It needs constant reassurance. It spirals. When outcomes feel a little bit uncertain, we go off the deep end. Ladies, we can do that. We do that. Men do it too, but we're talking to the ladies today. Untrained faith says, I trust God, but then you still try to control everything. And no shade, no judgment, because I do it too. I do the same thing. You're trusting God over here, but then you got 50-11 contingency plans over there. So I get it. I do it too. And I think that anchored faith is different. Anchored faith doesn't rush, it doesn't perform, it doesn't beg for confirmation, it doesn't collapse when silence shows up. Anchors are not decorative. It ain't pretty. Mhm. They're not emotional. They are engineered for pressure. And if your faith has never been trained under pressure, it will not hold you steady when life starts acting a fool. If your faith only works when things are calm, it's not anchoring your life, it is inspiring you. And that's two different things. Two different things. And so um we want to look at what faith is not. So we're gonna clear up something. Faith is not positive thinking. It's not denial. It is not pretending you're okay. Faith is not quoting scripture while you live dysregulated. Faith is not waiting on God to do what you are avoiding. Let me say that again. Faith is not waiting on God to do what you are avoiding. That's not faith. And faith is definitely not ignoring red flags and calling it grace. I'm not even gonna touch that because y'all already know. So here's the truth we don't say out loud. Here's the truth. Faith hasn't been trained. It'll confuse peace with avoidance and patience with fear. And that is how people stay in toxic situations too long. That's how we overextend our welcome in relationships, in friendships, even in marriage. We're going to call it what it is. That's how we keep reopening doors that God already closed, not because we don't love God, but because our faith has never been disciplined. And we're going to take a look at how that it can affect us in a negative way. So, part 3, how to train your faith. Just like strength training, faith training is repetitive. It's not glamorous, but it is intentional. And it works over time. So, I'm going to give you 3 ways to train your faith so it can actually begin to anchor your life. Number 1, train your faith to govern your reactions. Train your faith to govern your reactions. If your faith can't slow you down, it cannot anchor you. Meaning, if your faith doesn't prompt you to pause before you respond, it can't anchor you. Your faith should prompt you to pause before you make a decision, before you respond verbally, before you do anything. That divine pause is really important. And if your faith does not prompt you to do that, it's not anchoring your life. Anchored faith pauses before responding, period. It does. It doesn't fly off the handle. It stops for a minute and it evaluates things. Even if you only have a couple seconds to evaluate, you are in your mind saying, okay, Lord, am I looking at what I think I'm looking at? I need some direction right now. That's that anchor. That's that anchored faith. It doesn't need the last word. Anchored faith does not need the last word. You can let somebody else have the last word. Pick up your pocketbook and go on about your business. You're not worried about all that stuff. That's as my pastor says, majoring in the minors. We don't do that when our faith is anchored because we're already sure that all things work together for the good of them who love the Lord and are the called according to his purpose. We already know this. And so there's no reason to argue about who gets the last word. What are you arguing for? So anchored faith doesn't need the last word. It doesn't explain itself like into exhaustion, like ad nauseum. You're not constantly over explaining your perspective, your opinion, why you see things the way you see it, why you believe the way you believe. You're not over explaining that. It just is what it is. And people can accept your perception, your opinion, the way you see things or not. It's really okay. Either way. We're not over explaining. We're not doing that. It doesn't react just because something triggered you. Anchored faith has done the work to heal the triggers because we know, and I say this all the time over here, my triggers are my responsibility. They're not the responsibility of the person that I think is triggering me. Understanding how to respond to a trigger is my responsibility. Because if I give that responsibility to someone else, then I'm also giving them the power to dictate my mood and the way I respond to life. And nobody should have that power over you. You should be the one that dictates your mood. Your faith, that anchored faith, should dictate your mood, not what somebody else says or what somebody else does. So trained faith asks the question, what response keeps me aligned with my faith? What response should I have right now that's going to keep me aligned with my anchored faith? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. Anytime anything comes up, and it doesn't have to be drama. It just could be a decision that you need to make. What response is going to keep me aligned with my faith? And don't necessarily look at what response makes me feel better right now, because every time you choose restraint over reaction, you are strengthening your faith muscles. I'm going to say that again. Choosing restraint over reaction is one of the ways to train your faith muscles. Does that make sense? It makes complete sense to me. All right. Number 2, train your faith to shape your decisions. At some point, faith has to move from your mouth to your choices, because anchored faith stops asking, how do I feel about this? And it begins to ask, does this align with who I am becoming? Trained faith chooses alignment over attachment. Peace over proximity. Clarity over chemistry. Yeah. This is where faith stops being so emotional and it becomes a little bit more directional. We are using the discernment that God has given us, the logic that God has given us. And that anchored faith starts being a little bit more directional. We're not making choices and decisions and giving responses out of emotion. When you are anchored, you are centered, you are grounded. You are grounded knowing that the promises of God are true. So you don't fly off the handle over every little thing. That's not what we're doing when our faith is anchored. You don't need another sign. You don't need another sign. But you do need more obedience on your part. Instead of asking for all those signs, just do what God told you to do in the first place. And you know you heard him clearly. You know you heard him clearly. And you just need to act on what it is he's telling you to do. Let's see. Number 3, train your faith to regulate your body. This part really matters because faith is not just spiritual, it's also physiological. And I didn't know that until 2021 when the bottom fell out of my life. And I had to hold on to God with everything in me. And then I figured out, okay, this faith thing has an effect on my body too. Um, this is what I found out. If your body is constantly anxious, hyper vigilant, or always bracing for impact, like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, that has a physiological effect on your health. Um, and you haven't really stepped into and fully embodied your faith yet. This is what I found out. This is what's true for me. Um, Anchored faith settles your nervous system because you finally understand that the scripture that talks about being anxious for nothing is real. When your faith is anchored in God and what you know about God and what you know about what he is capable of, that can calm down your nervous system. And you're not like looking around trying to see what's going to happen next. You just trust and you lean into God like never before. You lean into his goodness. You lean into the truth of who he is. You lean into his power. And you don't just believe, you know that what God has for you is for you. Period. That anchored faith creates internal safety and emotional safety, mental safety, sometimes physical safety. It teaches your body that you don't have to panic to be protected. The faith that only lives in your head will abandon you. When stress comes, it's gone. If it's not anchored, it's gonna float away. That's the whole point of having an anchor on a boat, on a ship, so it don't float away. Anchored faith feels steady in the body. Not just convincing with words, but it really feels steady in your body. Now, I want to make the homecoming connection because we know that this is homecoming season for Fridays by the Fire and Girl Talk Sunday. So let's make the connection. How does this connect to coming home? Because homecoming is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to yourself, stronger, steadier, more regulated, more rooted and grounded in God. It's about gathering up those parts of you that learned how to survive without the anchor. Those parts of you that learned how to survive with not getting what you asked for. And that mostly can leave you feeling unanchored. When your faith is trained, you stop outsourcing your stability. You don't outsource that. That stays here. That stays inside of you because you're anchored now. And with the anchored faith comes stable faith. You just know. And you attach a belief to that knowing. And you trust that all will be well. Even when it doesn't look like it. Even when it doesn't look like it. You can trust that all will be well. My sister-in-law right now is in a fight for her life, battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. that has spread all over her body. And the family is in the midst of moving her from Ohio to Phoenix, Arizona, where they all grew up, because that's where she wants to be. She wants to be with her siblings and her family. And so that move is taking place this week. And because she is so sick, I don't think she realizes how her illness is going to heal her family in ways they didn't even know they needed to be healed. And I was talking to my niece about this the other day. I see it already. I see it already. Um, this is my former husband's family, but I kept them in the divorce. So I love them. I love them with everything in me. And I can see the hand of God in all of this, in spite of the terminal prognosis that my sister-in-law has been given. I see God moving in this very clearly. And in just a few short weeks, all 8 siblings will be together so they can be with their sister at her bedside while she can still talk and interact with them. And I'm sure they're going to be reminiscing and laughing and crying and, all the things. But um, I think something really beautiful is going to come out of this medical crisis. And whether my sister-in-law, stays here a few more months or, she decides to go home to be with the Lord, she wins anyway because she gave her life to the Lord a long time ago. She's been running for Jesus for a long time. And so we know where she's going. It doesn't right now when she goes is not the point. The point is the unity that her situation is cultivating in their family. And I love to see it. I love to see it. So, it doesn't really matter the circumstance. When your faith is anchored, you can see very clearly, no matter what happens, all is well. That is anchored faith. That is strengthened faith. When your faith is anchored, you stop living emotionally unmoored. And when you recognize that you're coming home to yourself, um, you stop living like you're just all over the place. You come back to what you know to be true about God, because what you know to be true about God makes what you know to be true about yourself more clear. Um, you come back to that emotional and mental stability that only God can provide. Yeah, you come back to that. So tonight, I want to leave you with this. I want to ask a question. Where is your faith reactive instead of rooted and grounded? In what areas of your life are you reacting to life instead of responding in faith? I want you to think about that. I had to think about that too. Are there areas of my life where I could be a little bit more grounded um, in my faith, where I can actually allow that anchor to hold? There was a couple places, and me and God, we working that thing out. So I want to ask that question to you. Where is your faith reactive instead of rooted? Think about that. What are you asking prayer to fix that discipline and obedience are meant to handle? Where are the areas in your life where you are praying and asking God to intervene? But He's saying to you, no, baby, this is what you need to do. You are more than capable of doing X, Y, and Z. I've already equipped you to do it. Now the question becomes, do you believe that you are equipped to do it? Have you anchored yourself in the knowing so that you can handle this situation yourself? And sometimes I think we pray and ask God to handle things for us because what needs to be done will mean that we have to let some things go. Could be people, could be habits, could be a change in your mindset, whatever the case. We know that things are going to have to change in order for us to handle the situation that we are capable of handling because God has already equipped us to do it. And that's where the pushback comes in. That's where we are reluctant to do what it is that we know we need to do because we know some things are going to have to change or some things are going to have to go. Some people that we love, people that we thought loved us. Long, long time friendships and relationships sometimes unravel once you decide to allow God to anchor your faith. And then that's why we hesitate to make the necessary changes that we may need to make and to make the necessary decisions that we may need to make. Oh my gosh, it, um, you don't need more boisterous faith. Your faith don't need to be no louder than it already is. It's loud enough. Stop making excuses. You don't need your faith to perform. Yeah, yeah. You don't need that. You just need to walk in what you know is true. And I get it. I get it. It's easier to keep the blinders on and just pretend like, you know, everything's good when you know it's not. It's easier to check out sometimes and just be like, this is just not the day for me to deal with this. I've done it. I understand it. But at some point, um, the realization should kick in that if you really want to be better, you really want to be stronger, you really want to finally experience some real peace in your life, you got to stop performing. You got to stop operating from a place of pretense. You got to get real. And I know this because I had to do it too. I had to get real with Sandy because Sandy was in La Land for many, many years. I had my own private parking space in La Land because I just could not handle accepting what I was looking at and seeing it for what it was and finally deciding to make the changes that I needed to make. I couldn't handle it. I had to wait until I was ready. Now, once I was ready, I cleaned house mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. But I couldn't do it until I was ready. I couldn't do it until I anchored my faith. I got rooted and grounded in the truth of who God is and who God made me to be. Once I got that, it was off to the races. You don't need emotional faith, baby. You need anchored faith, and anchors are built over time. It takes time to anchor your faith. It takes time to get rooted and grounded in God. It takes time. It takes time. It takes repetition. It takes courage to make the decisions that you know you need to make. That takes courage. It's not easy to do. But when you know it's necessary, then you got to grab hands with God And when he says move, you got to move. You got to be ready to move. Trusting, believing, and knowing that he's going to be with you every step of the way. And that's what my in-laws, I hate to call them in-laws because they're just my family, but just for clarification purposes, that's what we are doing together as a family right now. We are trusting and believing God every step of the way in spite of what it looks like, in the midst of what is happening. We're not in denial. We know what's happening, but we are holding on to God and we are holding on to each other. And that is the most important part. So I'm asking you that you keep my sister Barbara in your prayers and her daughter Paulette, we call it Polly. Keep her in your prayers too. And the entire Owens family. Pray for them. Pray that God will give them strength for this journey that they're about to be on. And that He will unify them in a way that only He can. And nobody else will be able to take the credit. They're going to have to give it to Him. Because only God can bring a family together in the midst of what they already know is going to happen. If God doesn't intervene, my sister-in-law is going home to be with Him. And so we're going to pray through this whole journey whenever God says whatever is going to happen because God is sovereign. He has the final say. So we're going to trust Him and we're going to love each other. All right. Thank you so much for joining me again for yet another episode of Fridays by the Fire. I know you are very shocked to see me because normally I'm not showing my face on Fridays by the Fire, but I said in 2026 that I wanted to do things a little bit differently. And so every now and then I may pop in so you can see me. But for the most part, Fridays by the Fire is an audio only podcast that premieres every Friday, 8 p.m. Pacific time. And I'm really happy that you came to join me today. All right. Next week, we will be back and we are starting a brand new series. The series is called Pregnant with Possibility. And we're going to start with trimester number 1. That's next week on Fridays by the Fire. Until then, y'all be good. Good night and God bless.